I never imagined our vacation in Greece would turn into a living nightmare. The four of us, me, my girlfriend Emily, and our friends Jack and Sarah had planned a week-long sailing trip to explore the azure waters of the Aegean Sea. Renting a 34-foot sailboat seemed like the perfect way to embrace the excitement and fast pace of our lives in America while experiencing the thrill of sailing. The first few days were idyllic. The sun was bright, the wind was perfect for sailing, and the endless expanse of blue ocean was breathtaking. Emily and Sarah sunbathed on the deck while Jack and I took turns at the rudder, navigating our way from one stunning island to the next. It felt like paradise. But as the days passed, I noticed a subtle change in Sarah. She started withdrawing, spending long stretches staring out at the sea, lost in thought. One night, as we anchored in a secluded cove, I found her standing at the edge of the boat, gazing into the dark water. "Sarah, you okay?" I asked, trying to mask my concern. She didn't respond. Her eyes seemed unfocused. I gently touched her shoulder, and she jolted as if she was woken up. "Oh, I'm fine," she grumbled, her voice distant. The following day, her behavior grew more inconsistent. She avoided meals, muttering to herself and obsessively checking her reflection in the water. Emily and Jack brushed it off as seasickness or homesickness, but I felt that there was something more to it. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, I heard a splash. Rushing to the deck, I saw Sarah in the water, frantically thrashing. "Help her," Emily screamed. Jack and I dived in, struggling to pull her back to the boat. Her strength was unnerving. It took both of us to haul her onto the deck. She fought us the entire time, screaming about needing to be in the water. We held her below deck, making sure she didn't leave her bunk. She clearly wanted to keep in trying to get into the water. "We need to get her to a hospital," Jack said, his face pale. But we were far from any mainland, and the language barrier with the Greek authorities made communication nearly impossible. We decided to head for the nearest port at first light. That night, Sarah's screams echoed through the boat. She almost spoke in tongues, her voice alternating between pleading whispers and angry screams. Emily stayed by her side, trying to soothe her while Jack and I took turns on watch, our nerves frayed. The next morning, I found Jack staring at a map, his eyes bloodshot. "We should be close now. There should be an island with a small town in just a few minutes. Maybe they can help." As we approached the island, Sarah's condition worsened. She babbled incoherently, her eyes wild with fear. When we finally docked, a group of locals greeted us. They spoke little English, but the sight of Sarah made them recoil, whispering amongst themselves. One elderly man stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "She cursed," he said in broken English, pointing at Sarah. Despite the language barrier, we managed to convey our need for help. One of the locals nodded gravely and led us to a small, makeshift clinic where a doctor examined Sarah. He muttered prayers under his breath, his expression grim. "She seems touched by the spirits of the sea," he said. Desperation gnawed at us. We took turns watching over Sarah, hoping for a miracle. But her condition continued to deteriorate. Sarah began to mumble in what sounded like Greek, which was strange since she didn't know a single word of the language. We couldn't stay on the island and had to keep moving to reach the mainland as soon as possible. Without wasting any time, we set sail immediately after the doctor's examination. That night, as I kept watch, Sarah's eyes snapped open. She looked at me with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. "They won't let me go," she whispered. Then she continued mumbling in what once again sounded like Greek. Suddenly she broke free of her restraints with vicious strength, knocking me aside. She bolted up the stairs and onto the deck, her eyes fixed on the water. Jack and Emily chased after her, but it was too late. With a final, haunting scream, Sarah leaped into the sea. We watched, helpless, as she disappeared beneath the waves. The ocean swallowed her whole, leaving us in stunned silence. The rest of our trip was a blur of fear and sorrow. We returned to the mainland and reported what had happened, but the authorities could offer little solace. All we wanted now was to return home. Back in San Diego, life resumed, but the shadow of that trip lingered. Emily and I broke up after a while, and Jack and I drifted apart, unable to shake the memory of Sarah's madness and the terror we experienced. Months passed, but the nightmare never truly ended. I was haunted by vivid dreams of Sarah's face, twisted with fear and anguish, calling out to me from beneath the waves. Some years later, Emily and Jack confessed to experiencing the same dreams, and I began to wonder if Sarah's curse had followed us home. One evening, I received a call from Jack. His voice trembled with fear. "I think I have seen Sarah. She was in the water near my dock," he said. I couldn't believe it. Jack must have been drunk. I drove over to Jack's house, a small house by the lake, just a few miles from where I live. He led me to the dock, where we stared into the dark water. For a moment, I thought I saw a pale face just beneath the surface, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "She's haunting us," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Desperation drove us to research other similar stories from Greece, in particular the Aegean Sea. We tried to find any practical advice but found nothing useful. The following week, I was woken by a frantic call from Emily. "Jack's missing," she said, her voice trembling. "He went out on the lake and never came back." We searched the lake for hours, but there was no sign of Jack. The authorities eventually deemed it an accidental drowning. The incident left us shaken, convinced that whatever had affected Sarah must have something to do with Jack's disappearance. Emily and I kept contact, and both of us grew increasingly paranoid. I decided to leave San Diego, hoping that distance might break the negative energy. Years passed, and the memories of that fateful trip remained fresh in my mind. I avoided water at all costs, fearing that whatever had taken Sarah and Jack would find me as well. Emily and I didn't stay in touch. I felt like I needed distance from her as well. I didn't want to be reminded of it all. But the fear never truly left me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind reminded me of the horrors I had witnessed. I lived in constant fear, haunted by the memory of Sarah's madness and the knowledge that whatever had taken her must have had something to do with Jack. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I heard a familiar, haunting voice whispering my name. I turned to see a figure standing in the corner, their eyes filled with sorrow and rage. "Never forget about me," the voice said, echoing through the room. And then the figure was gone in an instant. I knew then that this terror would follow me for the rest of my life. No matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, the shadow of that nightmare would always be there. And so I write this as a warning to anyone who dares to venture the Aegean Sea. Beware the forces that lie hidden beneath the surface, for they are relentless. Once they have you in their grasp, they will never let you go.